With War Within released like right around the corner and the early access already, launched, the whole question about what am I supposed to main, like what are you supposed to play is, very up in the air right now. And usually I go into like every expansion with like a kind of general idea of what I want to play as and like what I want to do. But for this time around, I was honestly very much in doubt. And that doubt actually came from me thinking that a lot of the tanks and a lot of the classes honestly were really, really fun and a really good spot. So committing to a singular class or a singular spec was actually really difficult for me this time around. And after talking with, friends and just hearing other people on the internet, it kind of seems like I'm not the only one having trouble picking something. So, in this video I want to talk about what I actually ended up maining for the first season for War Within and, some of the tanks and some of the classes that got really, really close. And just in general, something that I really enjoyed, playing here in the very end of Dragonflight. And if you are following along from home and you're also not really sure what you want to play, my basically thought process, my first thing that I ask myself is, of course, what kind of content is it that I'm interested in doing? And for me personally, it's Mythic Plus, as it always has been, and probably most likely it always will. That's my jam, that's my game mode. Raiding I find fun most of the times, but I really don't enjoy pucking and I don't really enjoy going into all the organization of going into Mythic Raid. The actual gameplay and the actual raiding itself is really fun. It's just all around around it that just isn't really for me. And again, also with the level of difficulty that I'm interested in engaging with, right? I don't need to be pushing the very top keys or whatever. I want to get to a level where I'm pushing myself and I'm improving as a player and, see how far up I can go. So I kind of want a class that can take me there. But then again, I don't really need to have the best class or the best tank or whatever, because you can basically push 90% of all the classes. And then of course the last question that you also should consider is basically just what role you want to fill. I want to tank. I'm a tank main, meaning that, I'd like to have my DPS specs on secondary, but for me it's mostly tanking. And, for you can be that just purely you want to DPS, which is wonderful, but you can maybe also, you want to do hybrids and want to be able to switch around, and that will also have an influence on what class you should pick. So before we go into the whole what classes did I even consider, I just want to give a quick shout out that all these meta lists, not any shade to any content creators or whatever, but these tier lists, guys, you cannot use them for anything except for entertainment. And it can be fun just to sit down and just talk about the different classes and putting them into tier lists and having the discussion, talk shop and whatever. But honestly, before the War Within is actually out and before the Mythic Plus season even begins, it's kind of just guessing game, right? Even the things that on beta or right here, in our early access, is performing really well. As soon as Mythic Plus actually comes out, there's gonna be a bunch of tuning that anything can honestly change. So if your sole purpose in this game is that you need to play whatever is the strongest and whatever just straight up does the most damage, there's nothing you can do besides just waiting for this season to be almost done and the meta then being forming, because right now it's, as I said before, it's basically a guessing game. Nobody has the answer, and waiting for that answer is honestly, in my opinion, a bit of a waste of time. And not only a waste of time, in my opinion, but also it's really just robs you from one of the more fun aspects of the game, which is just trying out a bunch of different classes and something that you might not have thought that you wanted to play, or maybe you were interested in playing, for the sake of finding something that you think is very doable for whatever goal it is that you need to do in this game. And my problem with the tier list, I guess, is not necessarily the tier list in themselves. It's basically just the lack of context that people put into these videos, this content, and as well as not only the content creators, but also just people, right? You go in and there's a bunch of people in the comments who just, go in, watch, scroll towards the end and then see whatever class is at the top, and then they just go with that without actually comparing them to each other and finding out why this class has ranked, specifically higher than the other one, and also like what situations, because rarely in this game a class is gonna be like superior in like every single scenario and stuff like that. There are like, aspects, and you can play classes that has like specific niches where they really perform really well. Maybe it's like, cleave damage, it's like priority damage, which can be really huge, right? That's not really gonna like show on your overall damage, which is also just kind of a lie, but I mean, overall damage is kind of like a scam, just only looking at that. But, having really high priority damage, it can be extremely beneficial for your group and your performance. And it leads me into like my second and last like part of this whole rant, is that I think in WoW, like, our community, we have a really big problem with the whole idea of, if something is not the best, like the very best tank, DPS, a healer, or whatsoever, like if you are playing as the second best, that can still be good. Like, not the best, the second, the third, or whatever, can still be a very great tank, or DPS, or healer, as I said. Why I bring up tanking is because I think that's a really clear example of that, where if you look at these different like tier lists, and especially like with people who rank like all of the specs together and not like separate them into the different roles, kind of see that like most of the tanks, like maybe like the bottom tank stays around like a B, or maybe like a lower A. And like, if you take that into, the context, like it's that is still a really, really great choice. So if you just absolutely love, I don't know, like Guardian Druid, or like, which is actually doing really well in Warframe, but like if you like a specific class or spec, and it's ranked around a B or like a C, or like maybe like I guess I said before, lower A, just because it's not S, like plus S and S tier, it's still a really good choice, a really great choice. What you need to like remember is, when most of these content creators are making these tier lists, they are kind of talking about if you can perform at 100% efficiency on these different classes, where they're gonna line up. And that's a really important context, because I don't know about you, but like, how many classes can you actually play at like 100% efficiency, right? Like, that's not all of them, at least like not even maybe half of them. And like, maybe that's the thing, like, where you can play your class at 100% efficiency, but the like meta pick, the S tier, the whatever, you might not be push that up. That means that you can actually do more damage, or do more, you can just be more of a benefit to your group if you're just playing a class that you just thoroughly enjoy and just are really good at. And then also, just playing a class that you enjoy is gonna make you enjoy the game a lot more. Please don't push yourself into playing something that you don't actually want to play just because that you want to be a good teammate or like good whatever, No, just please, for your own sake, this is my advice for you, just focus on what you actually enjoy to do. And just don't really pay too much attention to tier lists and like meta talk and stuff like that, at least not before the actually season begins. So with that whole rant done, let's actually like go into the classes that I was like thinking about like going into Wolfenstein with. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, my doubt or my problem with picking a class actually came from a luxury, which is, that I actually was having too much fun on a lot of different tanks. So, the very first class that I was considering playing, and the thing that I actually thought that I was going to main from like maybe a month before Warframe came out, was the Protection Warrior. The Protection Warrior is very much like my baby. It's maybe the tank that I'm most confident on. I think I mentioned this before, but like basically just if you were forcing me to go into something like blind content where I had no idea what the dungeon was, I knew it would be extremely hard. What the tank that I would most likely choose just to be like the safest would be the Protection Warrior. Protection Warrior fill this like fantasy that I really enjoy, or where like I want to play a tank. That means basically that I want to play as a huge like guy who just takes on a lot of this aggro and just like can just takes hits on hits and just never like fall over. And Warrior just is that, like, what a Holy Priest is for healing, where it's like, oh, okay, like, you just focus on healing, right? You just focus on putting, like, people's health bar from 0 to 1. There's not, like a huge gimmick. There's not really much. That's just a Warrior for tanks. It's a big guy with a shield. He blocks and he ignores a bunch of the pain. Mix that with, you know, a good mobility with you, where you, if you pick the heroic, improved heroic jump talent, you know, you actually have a pretty good movement speed after, like, and also with the cooldown reduction on it. But you also have, you know, your charges, which is extremely well, and just like you're constantly sticking to all these groups, and it makes it always a joy just to pull, and it makes it a really easy tank to just honestly just keep on like being in combat all the time, just keep on chain pulling. You also add, like, yeah, okay, so it's not the tank that's gonna add the most to a group in form of like utility and like buffs and stuff like that, but I think for what it actually brings to the table, it's honestly like, it's pretty good. Like, this is where, like, one of those examples as I mentioned before, it's not the best, right? It doesn't have these huge silence that that Demon Hunters have, and it might not have the Death Knight's grip. But you have, you know, multiple stuns that can actually, you know, lock down a group like pretty efficiently, at least if you're actually like coordinating it a bit. Also, you have like Rallying Cry, which I feel like a lot of people are not talking about. And sure, it's not the best like group defensive, but it's still like, you know, it's still something. It's still pretty good, and I still have seen, you know, mechanics where, you know, maybe not like have survived it because of Rallying Cry, but at least have give the healer just a bit of a breathing room, which honestly can make the difference sometimes. And of course, you also just have Battle Shout, which is great just to like buff all like your teammates, right? It's not as good as Chaos Brand, because Chaos Brand has actually a bunch of classes who do like even melee attackers actually, you know, such as like Retribution Paladin does magic damage, where they will scale more with Chaos Brand than they actually will with the Warrior's Battle Cry. But still, like, you know, it's for basically nothing. You just get an extra like buff to your teammates. I think the Protection Warrior is pretty cool. But honestly, the main reason why I love the Protection Warrior is because on that tank, I feel like I have an answer for basically everything. And there's no line that the Warrior is one of those tanks where his or hers, its weakness is like really extreme, as well as their strengths are like really extreme. So they are like on both sides, right? They have a really good strength, which is basically just that they are the kings of physical damage, which is like a huge percentage of like all the dungeons, just for melee and stuff like that, and also tank busters, and like, you know, there's a bunch of stuff that's just warriors can just basically ignore. But then they have their weaknesses of like, you know, prolonged magic damage, and also like bleeds and like dots and stuff like that, that can kind of wear down the warrior. And it kind of seemed like in War Within there was like going to be like a fair bit of this like magic damage and like, you know, the dots and bleeds and stuff like that. But, you know, since Dragonflight, like, because before Dragonflight, this has been like a really big problem for the Protection Warrior, but I honestly feel like now with like these extra talents, such as like talent to block spells for like a few seconds, kind of gives the warrior a strategic like moment of like where you can actually choose when to use these cooldowns and actually, you know, kind of save yourself in these very like harsh and like spots and like moments for the Protection Warrior. But it's not something you're gonna have up all the time, and you still have to deal with the weaknesses of playing Protection Warrior. But that's honestly a gameplay that I enjoy, because it rewards you for learning the dungeons and for learning where the danger is, and then, you know, accurately react to it. Warrior also, just for a side note, also brings two really fun DPS specs in my opinion. I'm mostly an arms guy more than a Fury, but I also just enjoy turning my brain off and then going completely like berserk mode, right? But yeah, no, arms has been like really up there for me as like a DPS alt for my tanking that I thoroughly enjoy. It's also something like, you know, the thing that's like keeping me mostly from Fury is that I think it's kind of difficult to gear up besides like when you're maining tank, because you need to have two-handers. But as soon as you get one like two-hander, you can go into arms, and then you can play arms until you get the second one for Fury. I think it's a little bit complicated, not complicated, that's the wrong word, but just a little bit annoying that you have to like get the right, you know, 200, and also with Warrior, with how much they still in this day and age actually scale with gear. that can kind of put a limit to it if you're really into free. But for me personally, I've always been more of an arms guy. I just can't get enough of sweeping strikes for some reason. I think that's like the coolest thing ever. It's the most simple thing, but I love it. So yeah, warrior sounds great. Why did I not go into War Within on my warrior then? Well, I mean, I needed to try out the different tanks just to make sure that I was really stuck on warrior. And let me just tell you, I mean, for like my ranking of it, this is not a ranking of like, you know, just like how efficient they are, how great they are. This is just more like, you know, my fun level. I think Guardian and Paladin is kind of on the lower end. Guardian has just never really been me. I'm not really a huge fan of the rotational aspect of it. I really do love their defensive cooldowns, and I do love the hybrid class kind of fantasy. I do like, you know, they kind of have this like support elements to it, and the same goes to Paladin. I just played Paladin for the last season, and with my raging ADHD and stuff like that, I need to change class every single season or I get like tired, right? So right now the Paladin is just like on the bench on the sideways. I'm still gonna level it up. I'm still gonna like see what the hero talents there are and like, you know, maybe like throw it into Mythic Bots, but I'm not gonna go, I don't suspect myself in the future going any like crazy on it, at least not for the first season. Now, Demon Hunter and Monk are two classes I'm very interested in playing, but not something I necessarily see myself maining. I still think that the Monk is a little bit wonky. And again, I don't know really wonkiness, because I think that rework is actually really great and actually fixes a lot of the problems that I had with Brewmaster before. You know, I did do the whole Keystone Hero challenge back in season 2, I think. And right there, back then, I actually felt really much in love with Press the Advantage, which unfortunately shares a choice node with Weapons of Order. And yeah, I just actually never really been a huge fan of Weapons of Order. It's boring to me. Like it's performing like really crazy and like so far ahead of like Press the Advantage. And I'm just really not really a huge fan of that playstyle. But like in general, like that's like honestly my only really complaint about the Monk. So. But it's still a big enough a complaint that I don't really enjoy the proper build of it. That I'm not really seeing myself as maining it. And just more like, you know, hop in, gear it up, you know, get some rating on it. But honestly, just keep it like, you know, casual and just fun. Now, Demon Hunter is most likely going to be my ult like right after Protection Warrior as my, you know, main ult, if you can call it that. I think the Demon Hunter is just incredibly fun. It's the most mobile tank. That just makes it, it just makes it so incredibly easy to chain pull and just keeps the flow going and just really like makes the whole dungeon feel extremely speedy. It's also really rewarding because if you fuck up any moment of your rotation, you will die. And you know, so when you actually pull something off, it feels really incredible. What really like holding it back, honestly, is just that I played so much of it in season 3 that back then it was my main, and so I'm just a little bit like, you know, drawn out on it. I'm just a little bit tired. I don't know. It's just I couldn't just see myself putting like many hours into it. But as I said before, like with the whole same situation with like the Monk, it's something I very much would like to, you know, to keep up. It's something I very much enjoy to play, but it's not going to be my main. So surprisingly for myself, if you caught along, you know, I went for all tanks, means there's only one left, which is the Blood Death Knight. Now, Blood Death Knight is definitely the tank that I played the least in Dragonflight. I did actually play it a bit in Shadowlands, and it was actually the tank that made me switch to tanking in the first go and actually go serious with it and find out that I actually liked it. You know, I was just trying to level Thrust on Holy, I guess, and I was like, oh, this kills time so forever, I'm just gonna play Blood. And that's when I found out that, oh, speed tanking is actually really fun, and then I took that in. So that I have a whole history with Blood Death Knight, but I actually haven't touched it at all. I don't even think I have a single video on it on this channel with me playing Death Knight. That's actually not true. I did have one in Mob Remix, but yeah, that doesn't really count. The thing that really hooks me with Blood Death Knight, and has always hooked me with it, because I actually do generally enjoy it, but there has been one maybe like multiple huge issues that we'll talk about in a little bit. But the hook of the Blood Death Knight is basically just that it is the main tank where all of the responsibility of your survivability is in your hands. Meaning, of course, that, you know, if you fuck up, if you make a mistake or something like that, it's gonna be yours on the ground and it's gonna be your fault. And that can be very intimidating, but honestly, that is also, as a, like, you know, with the whole like Vengeance Demon Hunter, they also kind of share this whole thing. It's really, really rewarding when you do, like, when you play properly, when you actually playing correctly, and when you're doing all the things, because then again, it's all you're doing. It's all on your shoulders, in your hand. And I like something that keeps me going with WoW and like pushing in Mythic Plus. It's basically just always improving, and Blood Death Knight is really the tank that like highly gonna like push yourself. And then of course you also just have a bunch of great utilities right now, also with the rework, because Blood Death Knight got a whole rework. I'm pretty sure, like I'm sure you are like aware of that. You also like, you know, spread out like your anti-magic shield to your enemies. You have like all the grips, which just makes like gathering like packs and like groups of mob like maybe like the easiest like of any of the tanks. One problem I've had with Blood Death Knight in the past that I kind of got like got over, I guess, is the lack of mobility. I mentioned before with like the Protection Warrior and the Demon Hunter, like they are really, and Monk as well, they really excel with mobility, making it extremely like easy to speed tank, to chain pull, and just like keep active and just keep it going. And Demon Hunter, Blood Death Knight, it just kind of falls a little bit flat on that. Since Dragonfly, you do actually have 2 stacks of Death Advance, which honestly, if you use it correctly, and if you use it a little bit like sparingly, you can actually like cover a lot of the ground, so you don't actually end up just becoming a full-on wheelchair. But again, it is the Blood Death Knight, so you can't you can't escape that sometimes you just are going to be like behind the group, because everyone's just like, you know, have all this cool jumping ahead, blinking and like shimmering, whatever, right? So that is honestly a problem. But one thing I kind of noticed with just playing a ton of Blood Death Knight over like, you know, the weeks leading up to War Within is basically just that you kind of get used to it. It's very jarring when you go from other tanks over to Blood Death Knight, but as soon as you actually get used to it and kind of get in the rhythm of the Blood Death Knight's mobility, I honestly haven't had much issues being ahead of the group and just always, just actually like taking lead and being ahead. When I went into to try out the Blood Death Knight, I did not expect it to like it as much as I did. I was well aware, you know, how the rework was going to change the Blood Death Knight, and honestly, playing it kind of still feels the same. The biggest difference is just the whole, like, you know, before the rework, how Death Strike worked was basically just that you would heal back the last 5 seconds of like the damage intake, and if you pressed it again, it would like reapply the healing that it already healed for, right? They changed it now, so it won't do that. Like, you only heal for 5 intervals, right? And as soon as, you know, if you press it again, it's actually only gonna heal for the last 1 second or 2 seconds, depending on like when you press it. You actually, to get the full healing out of a Death Strike now, you actually have to wait full 5 seconds. And as many probably I mentioned before, it's it's honestly a really, really great and healthy change to the Blood Death Knight. Because honestly, a lot of your survivability hasn't changed. It's just that the healing that you do has been spread out, and also the mitigation you're doing through, because basically before the rework, how you mitigated damage was just having a huge like blood shield, absorb shield on you. But since that's not really that viable anymore, it's kind of just changed over to your healing and mitigation has been spread out to like more abilities. And that alone actually fixed my biggest concern or complaint, or whatever you want to call it, about the Blood Death Knight, which has basically just been that it's kind of clear that Blizzard has a really hard time balancing this tank. Because if they nerfed Death Strike, then they basically just ruined the entire like feeling of like, you know, Blood Death Knight, and just kind of ruined their whole self-healing, which were the whole gimmick and how they, you know, mitigated damage. And that kind of just went into, so Blizzard just kind of went into another direction where it's like, okay, we just like gonna keep them basically like unkillable, but they just gonna do like 0 damage. And okay, yeah, I'm not gonna like, I don't honestly care that much about tank overall damage. Don't get me wrong, it can be important, but like unless you are pushing the very high-end keys, if you're not like timing a key because your tank is doing like lesser damage than if you pick something else, I feel like there's a lot of other things in your run that has gone wrong before like that's honestly consideration. But having low damage on a tank, what actually like means in gameplay wise is that it really sucked on the Blood Death Knight to pick up aggro. Especially if you had a class that could like, you know, outburst you, which most classes could. It would be absolutely dreadful to try to like gather up ads or like pick something up. Like basically you had taunt or you had your grip. And it kind of sucks to having to sacrifice a grip just because a warrior went completely ham. Or not even a warrior, because like that's something that every other tank also deals with, but just, you know, having a well-geared DPS player would just absolutely make it like insufferable to play like Death Knight, in my opinion. But with how Blizzard actually has spread out the healing and mitigation into your plagues and into your bone shield and like, you know, all your defensive abilities and stuff like that, it kind of just opened up the, Blizzard to making the Death Knights actually just do damage. And that also, you know, kind of amplifies with the whole hero talents. Where both of them are honestly pretty damage reliant. Satan is clearly, if you look at the like talent choices or whatever you want to call them down the line, it seems a little bit more focused on tanking, but still, damage seems to be a pretty like huge amount of the hero talents, which is just all around just like really fun. Because one thing that, you know, I even talked about this whole thing with like in the beginning of the video with like, oh, you know, the tier list and you don't know if the tuning and everything like that. But with Death Knight beforehand, before the rework, they kind of were in this phase where either they were extremely strong and not even extremely strong, either they were the best tank by a mile, or they were like at the bottom. And there's like no in between, and it was like really like infuriating to pick a tank that, you know, was doing well, and then just for that to be completely like nerfed to the ground. Because I don't mind not being the best tank. I'm actually really okay with that, and I actually find that also to be kind of intriguing and fun, not to be just the top. But the same way, you also just don't want to be at the bottom, and you know, so this whole like rework kind of opened up to Blizzard to be like, I guess, more like, you know, balanced in their balancing of the class, which is I find just so much more like comforting. And that's also just without going into the whole like, you know, cooldown reduction of like Bone Shield and Bone Storm, going into your dancing runes and weapon, and like it's honestly, I'm amazed of like how much fun I'm just having with this tank, and it really just, I just honestly just can't stop playing it, right? Even though that in my mind I'm still very much hooked on the protection warrior, and I still very much want to play him. I'm really interested, you know, in the hero talents. I'm ready like to Colossus looks like incredibly fun, and also Mountain Fane is like a really huge like class fantasy that is just it's just really, yeah, it's just really cool. But I just can't stop playing the Death Knight, and I feel like that's the gut feeling that you just kind of have to go with. And then with that whole set, I know that I like talked about, oh, this is going to be my main, but honestly, the way that I look at it is just that I want a character that I can go into with doing the campaign and like starting to do the reputation. Now everything is warbound, like, you know, account-wide. Meaning that whatever I do on my like Demon Hunter, I'm sorry, whatever I do on my Blood Death Knight is actually gonna transfer over to my other characters. Meaning, again, I'm honestly free to change if that's what I want to do right before the season starts. If I decide to go the other way, and so yeah, I decided that I'm going to for now stay on the Blood Death Knight until that's not fun for me anymore. And that might actually take a while, because oh boy, that's it's really fun thing, and I can't wait to push myself, and also just can't wait to having to have all this on my shoulders And yeah, I really hope that this video maybe like helped you guys, like, you know, getting like a little bit closer to your goal, and also maybe also just relax if you don't have the answer, because you're gonna have it, right? As soon as the War Within actually like launches and you get in and you try the hero talents and, you know, get time and have time to try out other classes and stuff like that, I'm pretty sure that everyone's gonna find their home. So yeah, with that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in War Within.